Hi, and welcome to the Saved, Healed, and Made Whole podcast, where holistic health really can be simple, affordable, and attainable for you and your family. I am your host, Kayla J. Esteban. I am a biblical naturopathic doctor at Sozo Holistic Healing, where I work with natural-minded moms to find healing in mind, body, and spirit. So go grab your favorite cup of herbal tea, take a deep, relaxing breath, and we'll get started. Welcome back, and I hope you've had great holidays so far. This topic today is maybe something that you're not quite familiar with. And if you have not really heard of the concept of an inner child, or if you're not exactly familiar with what it means, just don't worry. I will explain it a little bit more in detail in a little bit. But this episode is pretty important to me because I hear from other moms and a lot of sessions that I do with moms talking about trauma and things like that. One of the biggest things that moms often come back to is the way that their trauma affects their parenting and the way that they kind of show up as a mom or maybe don't show up as they would like to be showing up, right? I think we've all been there. And so our traumatic experiences from our past really affect our own ability to heal and really play such a big part in how we parent. And so I wanted to draw attention to that and kind of bring some more awareness with this episode and also kind of share like what we can actually do about it. So we're not just stuck being moms that are regretting our actions on a regular basis. So if you have not really delved into your past trauma or how it's affected you, unresolved trauma can cause depression, anxiety, dissociation, which is kind of a fancy word for just meaning like checking out, inability to feel compassion for other people, anger or even rage, control issues. I think that's a very big one, especially for women, and a lot of other symptoms. And if you are feeling any of these symptoms right now, friend, I do just want to encourage you that you are not a bad mom. You are just a mom who's having a hard time and a mom who has experienced some things in the past. And this is not to victimize ourselves and to say, oh, poor me, I can never do this because of my past experiences, right? It's not your fault and it doesn't enable you to just act however you feel like, but it does give an explanation. To me, I feel like there's a very big difference between an excuse and an explanation. And when we have an explanation, then we have something that we can do about it, right? So without even knowing you or having met you necessarily, I could genuinely say with most confidence that you are most likely doing the very best that you know how to do with the knowledge and the resources and the education that you have right now. Like, I truly believe that because, yes, there are a few people in this world that are genuine monsters, but for the most part, I think we are all really trying our hardest and we're all just flawed human beings that just don't always show up the way that we wish that we could. And it can be so challenging to be a calm, stable human and parent who is emotionally available to her children when you have these unresolved symptoms that are getting in the way. Like that, I've always thought of emotional baggage as it's like carrying a really heavy backpack that weighs you down, or it's like having a bunch of clutter in your path. We've all stepped on the Legos and had to, maneuver around the stuffed animal obstacle course, right? So it's kind of like our trauma just makes it harder. It doesn't keep that path clear for us. And it really is a challenge. And it's a lot of extra work when we have these things weighing us down and getting things in our way. And it's really hard with children, especially young children, because children, honestly, probably all children up to teenagers are still learning how to regulate their emotions, but especially young children, like they haven't learned, like their brain has not developed to regulate themselves, right? They haven't learned how to manage their own emotions, and it's ideally supposed to be our job to co-regulate with them to kind of be that calming presence and be that security and teach them how to manage those emotions until they learn how to do it for themselves, which makes it very, very hard when some of us never learned how to regulate our own selves. Maybe our parents were coming from a position of trauma or addiction or abuse or something like that, where maybe they weren't able to regulate themselves. They weren't able to regulate us, and we never really learned how to properly self regulate. And so, how could we be expected to self regulate ourselves and also co regulate with a child without having learned how to do that, right? So I think the first thing that we really need to do is to just manage our expectations and understand that it's really hard to come from a place of peace and regulation that maybe is completely foreign to you, or it's a skill that you haven't learned yet. And it doesn't mean that we just get stuck there, right? Like, we can absolutely learn, and we should learn whether we have children or not. Learning how to self regulate is a skill that every human being should have, for the sake of ourselves, but also just for the sake of the people around us, right? So this is a skill that I want to talk about, and this is not really a skill that I necessarily teach. I'm sure there are other programs and there are other therapies and maybe things like that that can really help with teaching self-regulation. But my job really is to just help with that inner trauma, help with those past experiences, because once those things are out of the way, it's going to be 1,000% easier to do your own self regulation and to learn how to co regulate with your children. And children, honestly, like, children are not easy. Children are crazy and nutty and high energy. I mean, some of them are more than others. Maybe you don't have a very high energy child, but for the most part, like, kids are very stimulating. Kids make messes. Kids like to bang with loud noises. And so it's enough to have to deal with children on the outside, but at the same time we also have to deal with our own inner children, and so manage them both at the same time. And so if you're not familiar with what the concept of inner child or what that means, it is a term in psychology that was, I think, in our modern times is considered to be made popular by Carl Jung. But really, it's a concept that has been known, it's been across different cultures, and even in ancient health and healing, it's been recognized for as long. I don't really know how far back it goes. So Carl Jung didn't necessarily invent the concept, but I guess he kind of gave it a name. And so, what it really basically means is that whenever we experience significant traumatic events in our lives, there is a part of us that kind of becomes stuck or frozen in that age and in that stage of development. If you're a psychology nut like me, and if you're familiar with Eric Erickson, he talks about like these different stages of development. Depending on how old we are, we have certain ways of reacting and responding to things and certain interests and drives. And so part of us might be kind of stuck back in that particular age that doesn't really allow us to properly and fully move forward. And that was something that Eric Erickson also talked about too. So even as an adult, you might still behave in a certain situation like that particular age where you experience trauma. So, like, if you've seen an adult throwing kind of a tantrum and refusing to share or being self-absorbed or something like this is all very kind of toddler behavior. And maybe that person, like, when we see them as an adult, we just think they're a jerk. But maybe they just really never got past that toddler phase and they never fully properly developed. So if we are unhealed in a certain stage in our life, that kind of leaves this inner child or even an inner teenager to kind of be part of us. Like when we talk about parts, there's in internal family systems is like the psychology of that. And they're a therapist that talks specifically about this. But, like when you say, a part of me wants to do this, but a part of me wants to do that, right? So we have different parts in us, and we have these unhealed, traumatic experience. Inner children and inner teenagers can kind of manifest as some of those parts. So, like, inner children might be wanting to have fun, or wanting to eat that ice cream, or wanting to not wanting to share, or something like that. And inner teenagers might be very concerned with justice, or get very angry. Or they might be the kind of like snarky, sarcastic, bitter, cynical kind of version of us that comes out. And sometimes these inner parts kind of like rise up without us really being able to control them. And so for me, even though I am an adult mom and I love my kids very, very much, sometimes, I still have my inner children and my inner teenagers that just clash with my kids. Sometimes, like, my inner child does not want to share with my toddler, or sometimes my inner teenager just wants to be left alone and does not want to be touched, and just is over taking care of the kids for the day. And this can be something that probably most of us are not aware of, and probably don't put it in this kind of language of like, this is my inner teenager, or this is my inner child. But we probably can relate. Each and every one of us can probably relate to these feelings kind of rising up and making it hard for us to parent peacefully, and can be very upsetting for our nervous systems, and can lead to a lot of family clashing and fights and yelling and things like that. And it's fair, like our inner children and our inner teenagers want their own way, and they want to be seen and taken care of, and they want to be prioritized, and really they should be. Like, the reason why we might have a wounded inner child is maybe because our inner child never felt fully seen and heard and cared for as a child. And so, like, sometimes my inner children will kind of get angry and say, like, why are we taking care of these other children instead? Like, why aren't you taking care of me better and stuff? And so learning how to advocate for myself, and take the time to prioritize myself, and tell my inner children and my inner teenagers that they matter too, and making time for that, and having a good balance of my parts has been something that I really needed to work on. Because when I don't before I knew how to do any of this stuff, it was so frustrating and so overwhelming. And I think not having that language to be able to recognize what's going on just made me feel like a bad person, where I was like, why can't I why can't I be more peaceful with my children? Or why can't I why do I keep feeling angry out of nowhere? Why can't I just calm myself down? I feel like I'm just being selfish or being a bad mom. And that's not really what it is. It's just it's needing that balance. It's our inner children and inner teenagers are calling attention to something that's really important, because each one of us does deserve to have attention, and does deserve to feel needed and seen and heard. And it can be kind of a challenge to balance all this stuff, because sometimes I do kind of feel like I'm in a room full of children on the inside and on the outside calling for my attention. And it's a lot for one adult parent to handle. I don't think any of us should be needing to handle this all by ourselves, whether we are married in another kind of relationship, whether we're single parent, co-parenting. Whatever the situation is, we should not be doing it alone. There should be, family, or a mom group, or a good friend, or somebody that can help us to it's not their responsibility to co-regulate with us, or to be our parent necessarily, unless it is your parent. But as an adult, like, we are supposed to be adults. We shouldn't put the responsibility on other people necessarily to take care of us, or take the responsibility off of us, but to have that community. I think moms throughout history did not do this alone the way that we did, for the most part. Like, we were meant to parent in community, and together, to have other women helping each other out and have partnerships and take some of that load off. Because we feel this way now does not mean that it has to stay this way. And in my Revive consultations, if you're familiar with that, and if you're not, you can always check the link down below. I have worked with several moms on healing their parent wounds and working with inner child work. So if you're curious to learn more about how that works, you can always check out the link below. There's a lot more details. There's some frequently asked questions and things like that. You can always contact me at the other link below if you have any questions or if you'd like to book a session. And maybe you're already doing some great things like trauma therapy or EMDR. I know that's a pretty common one nowadays, or parenting coaching or inner child work. They're all great. I would never tell you to stop doing any of those things, but some of those things may or may not be as efficient, or maybe you're just feeling like they're not quite working as fast as you would like them to, or maybe it's just a little bit more work than you would like it to. And some of my Revive consultations, they really do help with just taking the load off, taking the weight, helping to remove some of those trapped emotions, helping to work through some of that past trauma so that it's not weighing you down anymore, and it's not cluttering up your path anymore. So it can help you to see more clearly. It can help you to feel more at peace and more relaxed. There are some other things too that can really help. Sometimes people are having a really hard time with nutrient deficiencies and things like that that make it harder for us to regulate our emotions, to be more calm, to be just managing our day-to-day life and stress as moms. If that is something that you feel like you haven't given as much attention to, I could always work with you on that to muscle test you in a Revive consultation to really get down to the details of exactly what nutrients you're missing, or if there's anything else like trapped emotions or anything that is causing issues for you or making it harder for you to regulate yourself. But if you are more of a kind of a DIY sort of person, there is also a trauma recovery workshop that I have available for you. It's an hour long. There's a link below, and it is like busting full of information that you can use to help support your physical body during trauma recovery, and is a really great just supplement onto whatever trauma therapy or EMDR or anything else that you might already be doing. And having support for your body as far as trauma and things like that and just our daily stresses, what a lot of people are not aware of is if we're deficient in those nutrients that help us to manage stress, then we're just kind of creating new traumas for ourselves on a daily basis, because everything that we perceive in our environment that's remotely stressful becomes so much more stressful when we don't have the key ingredients to manage that stress. And this is why people get diagnosed with things like CPTSD and chronic anxiety and depression and things like that, that we're just not able to regulate ourselves. It's like trying to make a car go without any gas, right? Like we can't regulate ourselves if we're missing those nutrients. And so the more we're stressed out and dysregulated, the more it's like consistent trauma and stress just getting stacked on top of it. So I am all about breaking cycles and not continuing in on the same course of traumatic cycles and repetitive experiences and things like that. So, by correcting these imbalances, we can really support our body so that it's ready to heal from the trauma and it's ready to cut the cycle off and create a new path and a new, more peaceful, more regulated path that's not just spinning around in that trauma. And when we are able to be peaceful on a day to day basis, when we're not dealing with chronic depression and anxiety or rage, we can actually be more stable and peaceful to go back to those past experiences to like properly manage that trauma instead of just recreating a new stressful situation by revisiting those ideas. And so you can always check out my Revive consultations if you want kind of the more personal touch, if you're ready for that. Or you can always just get a little taste test with the trauma recovery support. Both of those links are down below. It's the energetic work of actually removing the trapped emotions. There's lots of strategies I can share that are practical strategies that can help support you with healing your body, to be managing trauma, certain herbs that have high nutrients or are calming and stabilizing, or just certain techniques that you can be using on the day-to-day basis. I'm not a marriage family therapist or anything like that, or a parenting coach or expert or anything. So that is not really my area of expertise, but at least when I work with somebody who is able to balance themselves, who is able to regulate themselves, who is able to put that trauma in the past and allow it to rest there and to continue on with peace, whatever work that you might be doing with a parenting coach or with somebody else, a marriage family therapist, becomes so much more easier. And any techniques that you might be learning from them are so much more able to be put into practice in your life because you've already got that regulation and that peace down for yourself. Because one of my biggest passions is to really support moms from where they are at, to help them to be balanced, to be stabilized, to be peaceful, to be able to go about their day with confidence and with reassurance that they are not only doing the best that they can now, but they are also able to be doing so much better, able to have so much more peace and so much more calm, and that they can have a lot more success in their day-to-day life than maybe they previously thought up until now, and that we don't need to be sitting in despair or sitting in victimization or anything like that. We can leave it all behind, and we can start 2025 off with a lot more peace and a lot more calm, a lot more presence, and just a lot better relationship with our children, with our outer children, and also with our inner children. So if you like all of those things that I'm saying, you can check out the links below. Send me a message if there's anything that I've said that is not clear, or if there's just some more details that you would like to know about it. Please don't hesitate, and have a very blessed day, and I will see you next time.